Who remembers or knows what this game is? You can say if you know what it is. Game of Life, right? All right, so the Game of Life was one of my favorite games growing up. I have a lot of fond memories of playing it at my cousin's house. She was the first place that we ever had it. I think later on we ended up having it at my house too. She also had the PC version. So back in the 90s, to have like a game that was on the computer where it was animated was a lot of fun. And so we would play Life. The thing about Life also I enjoyed, that same family would play Monopoly. But you know how Monopoly is. It's very cutthroat and interactive in a way that doesn't always lend itself to being very fun, unless you're winning, and then it's always fun. But Life was a little bit more low-key, and you didn't have to worry so much about what the other players were doing. It was more about just hoping that you landed in the right spots. And it picked the couple of decisions you can make that change your game, hopefully that you made them well. So the thing about the Game of Life that's interesting is that, for one, it gives us a glimpse into how our world perceives life. So this board here, I mean, maybe this is the board you're familiar with. This one actually came out in the early 90s. And so, like, you have the start here, and you go all the way through, and then the ending is right here. Now, we have one at home, or we had one at home. What happens at our house is we have games, and then they tend to get broken, and things get lost. And we end up having to replace them before we want to. But we have a version of the Game of Life at home, and the board does not look like that. It's different. And I actually did some research, and if you remember playing this game maybe in your childhood, I'm not exactly sure when it came out, at least sometime in the 70s or 60s, I think. The board was different when it came out. So this has gone through different iterations, and it represents how we see the world. So the Game of Life in this iteration, you can either choose to go straight into a career, and you draw a career card right at the beginning of the game, or you can go to college, which is this direction, and when you go to college, you get debt, but whenever you get to this spot, you get to choose you get more choice with your career, which is something that we didn't play correctly until we played the computer version. Because you're supposed to draw three career cards and 3 salary cards if you went to college, and then you get a pick. Otherwise, when you just go straight to a career, you get whatever you draw. And so that was the advantage of going into debt. And so we value in the society when this was put out, like, okay, so if you go to college, you're going to have a better option later in life. And then also there's 2 other tiles or spots they make you stop on in this game. Right here and right here. So every player, no matter what, gets stopped here because they all are going to have this life event, which is getting married, and then they're going to have this life event, which is buying a house. So that tells you in the 90s how we thought about what life looked like. Now, the version that my kids have is a lot different. It has a lot more stops in different places. You actually have a lot more choices. Like in the new life, you can choose if you want to go the route to have a bunch of kids, or you can skip that. It's like have a family, don't have a family. There's like a section where you can like choose to be risky, and then you can have a chance to land on some squares to get a bunch of money, but you can also lose money, or you can take the safe route. And so this tells us how we think about life. Now the Game of Life, it also tells us something about how we think about what the purpose of life is, at least as a society. We're all working towards this same place, retirement. And what is the goal in the Game of Life as much as I can remember? Like, how do you win? The most money, right? So the whole goal is to retire well and have the most money. And so that tells us a little bit about what our society says about what our goals in life should be. Now, is that all that life is about? Is life a board game like this? Is it really just a game where we're trying to avoid the pitfalls and then hit the lottery, and then collect some life tiles and have some life insurance, or whatever we need to get to the end of life? Is that what life is about? Or is there more to the story than just going down a board? Now today, what I'm going to say is there is more to the story, because there's an event that should be on this board for every person that isn't on this board. And that's okay, because it's a board game. But if we were thinking about life, and there was one event that everyone had to stop and recognize and observe, it would be the event that we're celebrating today. The event that we're getting ready to read about here in a moment changes everything. So not only is it an event that we should consider because it changes life and it changes history, but also it answers that purpose question. It says this is what life is about. Not that these things are bad, because that is in some sense our trajectory in our world. But we can live within this story a slightly different perspective. It changes the whole thing. And maybe if we have a little bit more money, we use it differently. Maybe we make a different career choice that maybe won't make us as much money, but will help us in some other way or help people in need. And it's all because of this story that we're telling today. So if you want to take out your Bibles and turn to Matthew chapter 28, we're going to be looking at Matthew 28, verses 1 through 10. That's our gospel passage for this afternoon, or for this morning. Matthew chapter 28 is on page number... sometimes I try to find it, and I don't always remember to do it beforehand. 1422 in the Pew Bible. 1422, but it'll also be up here on the screen. So let's take a look at this story, and let's see what it invites us to consider about the purpose of life. After the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. So this is how the story opens. Now, for those of you who weren't here earlier in the week or last week, Easter doesn't start today. The story of Easter actually starts, all the way back after Christmas, or at Christmas. But the details of Jesus' last week start last Sunday on Palm Sunday. Jesus comes to Jerusalem, and he's welcomed as a king. He gets into the city, and then things start to calm down. A couple of days later, on a Thursday evening, he has a meal with his closest followers, his closest friends, and his disciples. And at that meal, they have this special ceremony where he says, this is the new covenant, and he gives them the Holy Communion. And after that meal, he gets arrested. And then Friday morning, he has a trial. And then Friday afternoon, he goes to the cross. Now, what we need to understand is for Jewish people, Saturday is what's called the Sabbath. So the Sabbath for them is a very important day. It's a day they don't work. And also in the days of Jesus, Sabbath, or a day started at sundown. So that means Friday at sundown is the beginning of the Sabbath. And so Jesus' crucifixion was in like early afternoon on Friday. And so they have to get his body off of the cross and in the tomb before sundown. Because if you're a good, faithful Jew like his followers, you're not going to be wanting to handle a dead body or be working on the Sabbath. And so there wasn't a lot of time. They had to get Jesus buried. And so what that means is that there was things that the women wanted to do to prepare his body for burial that they didn't get a chance to finish. And so sundown comes on Friday, and so they have Sabbath until sundown on Saturday. But then it's dark, so you're not going to go until the next day. So first thing Sunday morning, first light, the women go to the tomb, and when they get there, it's Mary Magdalene, and in this gospel specifically, Mary mentions Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. And then they go to the tomb, and this is what happens in verse 2. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. Now, what happens is that an angel shows up, and the actual order of events isn't clear. Like, did some of this happen before the women got there, or did the women show up and all of a sudden all of it happened? I don't know. But an angel shows up. Now, we need to talk about angels, because you maybe have something like this in your head. This is an example of an angel that we would see depicted somewhere. This is kind of like a Precious Moments angel. I feel like people would have an angel like that and made out of concrete in their garden or something. Here's another option. This is more cartoony, but it's, the halo's there and the wings. And here's an older depiction that would maybe be what we call an icon. But still, we see the wings, and that gold is supposed to be a halo. And this one doesn't even have legs. So these are all different depictions of angels. But whenever you actually look what the Bible says about angels, first of all, the word angel that we have in English just comes from Greek, and it just means messenger. So the word angel just means messenger, because what angels are messengers for God. So God would send them to bring messages, he would send them on tasks. Now, the angels in the New Testament and in the Old Testament, they are like humans in some way. If they are ever given a gender, they're normally male, but often they don't really depict all those details. They just look like humans, but then there's something about them that's different. And in this passage, it talks about them looking like lightning, which I just think means they were very bright and like shining. And also their clothes were as white as snow, so like whiter than this. This is pretty white, but if you look close, I promise there's like some stains on here they can't get out and different things. And so we're talking like white. And so this angel comes and it's clearly like a human, but not. And so do you blame the guards for either playing dead or just actually getting scared and passing out? So the guards come, or the angel comes and the guards pass out, and then this is what happens with the angels. The angel said to the woman, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you." So this angel has a message. He's been sent on a mission to tell the women that Jesus has been risen from the dead, he's been resurrected, and that they should go back and warn the disciples that he's going to meet them in Galilee, because they're in Jerusalem. Galilee's like north of that area. That's where they're from. So he's going to meet them there, is what the angel says. So the women have this encounter, and they start to leave, and then this is what happens next. So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly, Jesus met them. "Greetings," he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshiped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." So the women are going, and all of a sudden, there's Jesus. And then he says, "I want you to tell my disciples that I will meet them in Galilee." But now they don't just have the message of an angel. They have seen Jesus. And this makes them the first witnesses to the resurrection. Now, if you get on the internet, it's not hard to find on YouTube people who talk about, or on TikTok, both places, people talking about how the resurrection stories were made up, that they came later, that it was a group effort to lie about the resurrection. Now, one of the biggest problems with that claim, there's a lot of ways to approach it, but one of the biggest problems is that if you're making up a story in the first century, you don't make your lead witnesses people who don't have a right to speak in a courtroom. Because unfortunately, in the first century, women didn't really have that right. Their testimony, they could give testimony, but it wasn't really legally binding. People didn't take it seriously. But that's who Jesus chose to show himself to first. And he says, you're going to be the ones that take my message. You're going to be the ones who will be remembered as the first people to see me risen from the dead. And so he sends them back with this message. So this is where God's story meets our story. Because even though this happened 2,000 years ago, it matters for each and every one of us. If there's a guy who rose from the dead and says he's the Son of God and he came to save the world, and he's now the King of the world, I think we need to stop and think about him for a moment. Like the board I put up here earlier, that's an event that all of us need to at least observe. And we need to decide how we feel about it. We need to decide what we think. So the resurrection comes, the women take the message to Jesus. So we need to think about what it means, and if we believe it, but then how does it change things? Now this is what Peter says when he's talking about it. Then Peter began to speak. He said, I now realize how true it is that God does not show favoritism, but accepts from every nation the one who fears him and does what is right. You know the message God sent to the people of Israel, announcing the good news of peace through Jesus, who is Lord of all. Now the key of this passage is that he says God shows no favoritism. That's because before this moment, the Jewish people thought they had this special relationship with God, and if anybody wanted to have it, they had to become Jewish. But then Peter had a vision, and he was sent by a man named Cornelius, that's who he's talking to in this passage, who was a Roman centurion. And Peter realizes, oh, you know what? God doesn't show favoritism. Anybody can come and be part of the people of God if they just believe the story. If they believe it and they want to be a part of it. They don't have to become Jewish. And then the invitation becomes, look, you can hear the good news of the peace of God. So what this means is that Jesus brings an opportunity for us to find peace. So what is this peace? This peace is harmony with God. We were made by a creator. But our story is one where we've lost our way. And all he wants is for us to return, for us to have that harmony again. And because of Jesus, we can have it. And then this is what Peter says next. He said, he commanded us, that's him and his fellow disciples, to preach to the people and to testify that he is the one whom God appointed as judge of the living and the dead. All the prophets testify about him, that everyone who believes in him receives forgiveness of sins through his name. And so Peter says, we were given the responsibility of sharing this story so that the people of the world could hear that God wants to welcome them back, that he's extended a hand and said, let me save you. Let me deliver you from the broken world you're living in. Let me give you a meaning and a purpose you didn't even know you could have. So this is what the empty tomb is about. The empty tomb means we are free to finally live. The empty tomb means we are free to finally live. We're free to have forgiveness, to trust Jesus and to be set free from the sin and evil and the death in the world around us. So what does this look like? What does it look like to respond to that and to have this new purpose in our life? Well, that's what Paul kind of talks about in Colossians. He says, since then, you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. Now, this little verse here, the saying, set your mind on things above. This could easily become like very spiritual. If you've been in church in the past, and like I was raised in church, like it all becomes about like thinking about like going to heaven is a phrase people would use, the glory in the clouds. And then life here just becomes about waiting. It becomes about, trying to obey some rules. But that's not actually what the gospel teaches. What the gospel says is you can come and have a transformed life now. And so thinking on things above is a very practical thing. It means we learn to live in God's world, God's way. It means that we're able to live a life where we find flourishing and purpose and meaning, where we learn how to love, we learn how to live, we learn how to forgive, and we learn how to create. When we create, whenever we cultivate things, we're actually doing what God gave us to do, that ability to work with him and to be his partners. When we love, we are living as God called us to live. And it's all because of the empty tomb. The empty tomb means we are free to finally live. So if you've ever had the new car problem, I think you might know what I'm talking about. And I'm not meaning like you get a new car, like a brand new car. But if you get a new car to you, what always happens is all of a sudden you start to notice that car everywhere. You're like, I got this car, and I thought now all of a sudden everybody has it. And that's not because all of a sudden everybody got the car. It's because the more that you have the car, so you start to think about it, you notice it more. All of a sudden you realize that other people have that car. Thinking about things above is like that. The more that we spend time with God and are in his presence, the more that we notice his way, his love, his voice in the world. And we see that he wants to bless us and he wants to bring harmony and peace to the world. And that's why Paul says this, for you died and your life is now hidden with Christ in glory. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. And so this final thing that he's saying is, he's like, you were dead in sin, but now you've been set free in Jesus. You now share in his life. So this means two things for us. First of all, it means that we can have a new life today if you say yes to Jesus. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean that all of our problems are solved. One thing we learn as we continue to listen to the story of Jesus is that even though he's made things whole, it's only partial until his return. But we still can hold on to that hope and have a new life and have the power to live differently. But then it does also mean that one day when he returns, we will share in his resurrection. And this is the part of the Christian story that often gets missed. The heart of the gospel is that one day Jesus will return. He will restore the world that we live on, this physical world right here. He will restore it, and then he will resurrect us to be with him. So it's not like we go somewhere else. It's like God comes here. But all of the bad stuff goes away because he defeats it. And he sets us free from it. The empty tomb means we are finally free to live. So today we celebrate this event that changed the world. The day that makes everything different. The day where we were set free. Because the empty tomb means we are free to finally live. So there's 3 places you can be in this story. And it turns out that actually one of those, you actually go either to 1 or 3. So there's really only 2. But there's 3 places you might feel right now. The first place you might feel like is, okay, I feel like I'm on the outside looking in. I don't know much about Jesus or this story. Maybe you've heard about it. Maybe you've been to church before, but it's been a long time. You don't know. You're like, I don't think I know him or am following him. And if that's you, my invitation is to say yes to Jesus. That this event changes the course of human history. And it has changed history. The world we live in today is because of Jesus. The things we value, the things that we think matter most are because of Jesus. So maybe you're on the outside looking in. If that's you, there's a couple things you can do. You can talk with me after the service if you want to about that. Or, I said, mention the connection cards earlier, or I don't have my binder, but the little cards I mentioned at the beginning of the service, you can fill one of those out and just drop it in the offering plate. But if both of those things are a little bit too, invasive for you, that's okay. I'm a millennial. I will text people any day if I can get away with not having to call somebody. So that's my actual phone number. That's not, I sometimes have a Google Voice number. That is my actual number. If you want to text me, I can text you, or we can have a meetup or something. We can go have coffee, or we can have a meeting here in my office or something if you'd like to talk. Or I can talk to you on the phone. I'm not against talking on the phone, to be clear. I won't call somebody unless my first choice is not calling. You can also call that number. If you call it, I will call you back. Just to be clear. That is the first place you can be. The second place is maybe you're somewhere in the middle. You're like, I grew up in church, I got baptized, I got confirmed, or I have responded to an altar call whenever I was in middle school or something. I don't know your story, but you're like, I'm not really sure exactly where I am at with Jesus. And this is where I say you're either one of 2 ways. You're either on the outside or you're not. But maybe you just need a little bit of confidence. I think that we can be there sometimes. We think we're not doing enough or doing the right things. And the truth is, if you care, I think you're on the right track. But I would also encourage you to do one of these things if you're unsure where you're at. I'll be happy to talk with you and to walk with you in those conversations. And just to be clear, this is what my job's supposed to be. So you're not bothering me by asking me these things. This is probably, other than people expecting me to show up with a sermon every week, the second most important thing people should expect from me is I'm available if you'd like to talk to me. And so that is available. And then the third place you could be is you might be like, you know what, I hear this story, but I really do feel like I'm in a good place with Jesus. Like I'm walking with him, I'm talking with him. I did not mean to say the lyrics of that song that we're going to sing here in a minute. I pray regularly, however your walk is specifically. You might feel like you're in a good spot, and that is great. My one encouragement is to be vigilant, because it's so easy to then lose your way or to get off the way. It's so easy. And that's also normal, to go up and down, back and forth. This could be an opportunity for you to be like, I just need to, correct my course a little bit. And even if this is you, it doesn't mean we can't have a conversation. It doesn't mean there's things that we can't learn from each other. You might have a story about something God did in your life that we could share that would help somebody else in the congregation. That's something that the spiritual council we've actually talked about. Maybe there's stories that we can share to inspire one another. So we can have a conversation. So again, there you can talk with me after the service, or you can write a note in the communication card, or you can text or call me later. And I guess the fourth option would be if you go to the website and you fill out the email form, it will come to me. And we can do email. but everything goes to my phone, so you might as well just text me. The empty tomb means we are free to finally live. And so where are you in the story? Where are you in this relationship with Jesus? My encouragement to you is to say yes to him, to be set free from the darkness of the world, and to know there's the hope of a good life now. Not a perfect life, not a life without challenges, not a life without dips, but knowing that in the end is the resurrection. The empty tomb means we are free to finally live.